Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another great episode of the 5-Star Revolution podcast with your host, CJ Price. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel right now and join us on Facebook, 5-Star Revolution Podcast. Tonight, we have a very special guest, and his name is Johnny Moran. How you doing tonight, sir?
Hey, how's it going? Thank you for having me.
Not much, man. Just sitting here enjoying the night, and I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start from the beginning here. I'm sure you've seen some of my episodes already,
Yep.
and I kind of asked the first question to every single person. Were you a fan of wrestling growing up? And if so, who are some of your favorites?
I was a fan growing up. I I have a brother that's like 10 years older than me. So I have another brother that's also 10 years older than him. So they always watch wrestling. So I literally have like a Hulk Hogan LJN that I use to like teeth on. Like his LJ, like his hand is all crumbled up from me teething on it. Um, and then they used to have like Saturday Night Main Events like taped. So like instead of watching like cartoons and stuff like a lot of kids did, like when my grandmother would babysit me during the day, I would watch wrestling. Like I would watch old school Saturday Night's Main Event. I would watch cartoons too, but like every morning I would start out with Saturday Night's Main Event, and I would like try to get through because they would just record Saturday Night Main Event after Saturday Night Main Event and like try and get through a 6-hour tape before my mom got home from like work and stuff. So I've been a fan since I've been a baby, really.
And who are some of your favorites?
When I was a kid, I feel like I mean my all time favorites are probably gonna be Stone Cold. Um, when I was a kid, it was Hulk Hogan, Macho Man Randy Savage, Tully and Arn. I really enjoyed them. Macho Man, Ravishing Rick Rude. I really like the whole entire show. Like it's hard to like pick one. Like if I had to pick one wrestler, it would be Stone Cold Steve Austin. But um, as a kid, like I loved the entire show. I would literally watch the show top to bottom, and like I'd hate the heels and love the baby faces. But then there would be some heels like Arn and Tully. Like I just couldn't figure it out, but like I just liked them. Ravishing Rick Rude was another guy. Like he was a bad guy, but I really liked him.
Those were some of the cool heels, as you would
Yeah,
say.
yeah,
Yeah, I know what you mean. Like Randy Orton, when he was first heel, he was a cool heel.
yeah.
So everybody liked him when he was a heel. So I know what you mean exactly. And those are some great legends that you mentioned. Great choices to grow up on. So that's good. So let's skip a little head up in your life. Do you remember your first ever as a fan? Do you remember your first ever live event, and how did you feel when you first saw it live?
My first ever live event, I was probably like 6 or 7. Like my uncle, I live in Scranton, so the CYC, that's the Catholic Youth Center for anyone that's not from Scranton. Um, it used to be where WWF came. Like actually Monday Night Raw, it was either going to be at the Manhattan Center or the CYC in Scranton. They set it on like a couple documentaries now. Uh, so like I went to see wrestling there live, and like it's a little different there because it's a high school gym. So like you're on like the floor level. If you got floor level seats, like my uncle has always been a referee for basketball and football his whole life. So he refereed at the CYC. So he was able to get a connect on tickets. So I always had floor seats. So I didn't realize how big the ring was until I got there. I remember that first time like walking in, seeing the ring, and I was like, holy crap, like that's a real ring. Like that's the thing I watch on TV. I remember like sitting in the seats, the barricades, and like seeing the wrestlers like turn, like because there wasn't really a curtain. Like they literally just came out like WWF guys like Shawn Michaels or the British Bulldog was like coming right out of like the regular locker room because there was just a door because there was no curtain for them. So you'd literally like see them turning the corner and just walking right to the ring. So I thought that was so neat because like I was like, oh, they just go in like regular locker rooms. Like I can go in that locker room after this, like because like because it's like a normal gym like during the week, and my uncle would always like my uncle never took me back to like see the wrestlers when I was a kid, but like he would let me go to the locker room the next day. He's like, it's just a regular locker room. I remember he took me and like I was like, wow. He's like, yeah. He's like, isn't this crazy? Like they were in here last night. I'm like, really? I was like, where was Shawn Michaels? Like, where was like Stone Cold? Like, where were they sitting? My uncle's like, I don't know. Like, I wasn't in here, but they were in here. So like that like blew my mind as a kid. Like
So
going to my first event.
you were kind of like, wow, I get to share the same locker room as these guys that I see on TV.
Well, it's kind of funny. So years later, when I finally wrestled, um, and started on the independents, a show by the name of Big Time Wrestling by me. Um, they're huge and they bring in them like a lot of names. They ran the CYC. That was like my first big match like ever. And yeah, I was in that locker room and like Big Time Wrestling has a ton of like your TV names that came off of TV and like old school legends always on their show. So like I'm in a locker room with Ken Anderson, Bret Hart, the Nasty Boys. Who else was on that show? Sabu and Shane Douglas. Dean Malenko was there. Ricky Steamboat was there. And I'm like, I'm in this goddamn locker room right now. Like, what is going on? So, yeah.
So let's skip ahead a little bit more in your life
Okay.
here. Where is that moment in your head where you said, I want to become a pro wrestler?
Uh, it was always there. I just didn't know how to get there per se. I think a lot of people from like my generation in wrestling now, we all kind of did like the backyard thing, like get together with your friends, make a little show thing. You interviewed Mike Mitchell. Me and Mike Mitchell started out in the backyard together. Like literally, like our friends were like out of their minds, and they lived up on a farm, so they're cousins, and in between them is this little forest, but they owned it because they owned the property. So they cut a square in this little forest and they built like an arena. And then we started inviting people to come see our like wrestling matches that we would put on. So like that's where I got the bug. Um, the athletic commission in Pennsylvania got called on them because yeah, because the state needs their $3 from these kids that we weren't selling tickets, like they were free shows. So the state kind of shut us down. And then I remember that next summer I did like a bodybuilding show, and I was like, I messaged Mike, and I'm like, man, like, really want to wrestle. And he was like, yeah, me too. What are we gonna do? The state just shut us down. Like, and like neither one of us knew like anywhere we could train. So I just ended up Googling because I assumed so like by me there's backbreakers, which I didn't know about at the time when I was Googling, or the Samoans in Allentown. And like we both just kind of got jobs. Like he was working 2 jobs at the time. I think I was working like 3. So I was like, how the hell are we gonna make it and like pay for gas and all these things and tuition on top of it and driving an hour and an hour back every night? I'm like, oh man. So then when we Googled it, I was like, there's a school in Scranton. And I'm like, we live in Scranton, so how the hell could there be a school and we not know about it? So we ended up going to the school and actually finding the uh, the building, and the building in the front of it is a hairdresser. Never forget walking in there because like there was no sign for the school, like no sign for like Backbreakers Entertainment or Backbreakers Training Center at the time. They didn't have the sign outside yet because it was like pretty new. And we went in, and there's this lady getting her hair done, and like I looked at Mike looked at me, and he kind of rolled his eyes like we got screwed. Like this isn't even a real thing. And like I'm about to go to the lady, like, is there a wrestling ring here? And like before I could get the words out of my mouth, you hear boom, and you hear this like wrestling, like the ring slam noise. And she just points back that way. And then we went in, we talked to the head trainer, Justin Glory. I think we just sat there this first week. And then, like when we were kids, like shoot interviews were very popular, not podcasts at the time. was more shoot interviews, and they always would talk about how people got like taken advantage of and all that. So like before we even walked in the door, I told Mike, I'm like, yo, we're not signing anything, we're not putting any money down, we're not giving them a goddamn thing. I'm like, we're gonna find out the least amount of money we could pay him, and we're gonna pay him weekly. So thankfully, he had a weekly program. We eventually, like, we gave him more money once we like began to trust him, and the school still runs today. So like, we were really worried that like it was gonna be one of those scenarios where like we got our money taken, guy closes up the school next day. Um, I also continued my training. I also went to the sanctuary. It's called by me. It's in Hazleton, Pennsylvania. It's ran by John Trotsky, and Cowboy Billy Walker is now assisting training there. I've been trained by both of them. And then finally, I went to PPW school. That was ran by Tommy Swade and Mikey Whipwreck. Trained there for a solid year. And now I'm back at Backbreakers and the sanctuary training.
So, what were your first initial thoughts when you first hit that mat for the first time, when you took your first bump during training?
Um, Bumping was fine because I was already kind of doing that in the backyard. It was more like your transitions and working like the left and what foot you should step off the rope with. Like those things. I had no clue because like we were kids in a backyard, just like that looks like how they do it on TV. All right, that's how to do it. And like yeah, so like the literal like positioning things, like working the left, like I had no clue about that. Like suplex, I kind of already knew. A body slam, I kind of already knew. How to drop an elbow, I kind of already knew. Like a lot of those things, I kind of already knew, but like the techniques and stuff and slowing down, like there was no one that was a veteran. Like when we were just kids playing in a backyard, like putting on shows for random people that would show up. So like when we got to a school, I wouldn't say like the bump shocked me at first. It was more like, okay, you need to step off that rope with your left foot, or you need to step off that rope with your right foot. Like, with this, you need to take it with your right arm or whatever it would be. It was more of the technical stuff that I was like, oh man, I must have looked like and like the crowd doesn't know, but like in my head, I'm like, oh man, like when I was doing this before, like people must have thought I was an idiot. And in reality, like they had no clue.
That's funny, man. I remember when I first started training, and because I used to be a wrestler myself,
Mm,
I'm done with it.
mm.
Anyway, when I first started training, I used to come home so freaking sore
Oh
every.
well, yeah, that I kind of knew that was coming with the territory. Like, of course, I came home sore. Like, I had the huge red mark on my back,
Yep.
from hitting the ropes. All those things I just kind of expected. I also like I did a bodybuilding show before I started. Like I knew that you needed to look the part too. Like that was always my thing. Like when me and Mike came in, like that was one of those things we both agreed on. We were like, let's try and get bigger. Like let's look the damn part. You know what I mean?
So the reason I ask you about being hurt
Mm.
and being bruised up and stuff is because I want to know your thoughts about people that think wrestling is fake.
I don't like when people say fake. If you want to say scripted, sure. I mean, it's a scripted entertainment. Um, but then there's also places that work a little more shoot style. So really depends on the art form that you're really looking at. Um, it I prefer when people don't say it. Do I flip out and like argue and fight with somebody that says it's fake? No. I'll have a conversation with them about it. Like what you think about it is fake. I would say it's more scripted than anything.
My answer always is you can't fake gravity, man. You can't fake gravity, and I dare you to come to wrestling school for a couple days to see if how fake it is.
Mm, yeah.
So that's my answer to those people that think wrestling is fake. Anyway, let's skip ahead a little bit here. Who is Johnny Moran? Who is the character? What are you about?
It really depends on what character you're talking about. The current one I do on the Indies is the Dark Horse. But if I'm working for like per se like a Camp Leapfrog or High Tension, there's I also do Coach Moran or Counselor Moran. What you're probably most familiar with is the Dark Horse, and the Dark Horse character all just came up from um, I was originally the man Johnny Moran, and obviously Becky Lynch took the man and started running with it. So immediately I'm like, well, I got to figure something out. So then I was just Johnny Moran for a minute. And one of my close friends, Alex Watt, he runs the High Tension Network, along with Anderson Scott. Um, he said to me, because I was in like a multi-man or something, and he's like, dude, you're like the dark horse in all these multi-mans. He's like, I never know if you're gonna win or you're gonna be like the one that loses in like the end with like the last person. And I was like, dark horse. And I was like, wait a minute, like that's an underdog, isn't it? And I was like, it's the one like they don't predict to win that always wins. I'm like, I could flow with that. Because like, like a lot of times, like when you're in locker rooms, you feel like everybody's against you, and you almost feel like you have to fight for your spot. And like that's something I've dealt with my whole life. You know what I mean? So that's kind of where the dark horse character comes from, and that's kind of the persona I put out there when I am that character. Now, if you're looking at like a Counselor Moran, um, that's just a douchebag character that I think would be fucking magical in the corporate office. Like I just think of like people that, you know, I've had experience with in my corporate job that I have, and I I per se may not like them. And I just steal from their interaction with me, and I just figure out how to work it into a wrestling environment.
Sounds like you have a good mindset right there, my friend, about the whole character that you're doing right now.
Yeah.
So usually I challenge the wrestler to do a 30-second promo, but I'm not
Yeah.
gonna do that to you
I
because we
appreciate that.
we agreed to show some of your clip of your movie or your show you're doing. You mind
Yeah.
talking about that?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind at all. So I have a podcast also. I call it Moran and Friends, where I interview wrestlers on there. And on Moran and Friends, there's always like I try to get like a story, not like a road story per se, but like just a story that um, you know, you wouldn't expect from this person, like something about non-wrestling things, let's per se, or like conversations about wrestling and like stuff that goes on during it. And um, I was messaging a bunch of my friends, and nobody had a show this weekend. It was a weekend in August, and nobody had a show. So the guy that runs High Tension Network, Alex Watt, he said to me, he's like, "Hey man," he's like, "why don't you run your own show?" And I'm like, oh man, I don't know if I want to do that. Like, I don't know if I want all the headaches. I'm like, I don't know who I'm gonna get to work for me. And he's like, you just messaged like 15 people seeing if there were a show. They don't have shows. He's like, why don't you message them and see if they want to work a show? So it just so happened that like 90% of these people were already on my podcast. So he's like, why don't you just call it Moran and Friends the movie? And I'm like, okay. And then I took like either a funny story from their podcast interview or something I know constantly happens in the back. Like, sometimes you don't always go to the greatest promotion, and the promoter always wants to tell you we're a family here, and I'm like, yeah, well, a family wouldn't forget to pay me. You know what I'm saying? Like, so we tied a lot of funny stories that like you may interact with. A lot of people have watched the movie. We let a couple people preview it, um, and from what they said, a lot of people were like, it reminds us of Heels, but like just straight comedy. So if you're looking like a comedy version of Heels, that's basically what the show is. And we
Okay.
have matches on it. So it hopefully you all can watch it. It's going to be on the High Tension Network's YouTube. It debuts February 20th at 6 p.m.
I'll definitely keep an eye out for
Thank you.
that. Seems very interesting.
Thank you.
So, what's one thing you wish you knew that you know now when you first started?
Oh, I don't know. I was, I to think about that. I don't know if there's anything I would want to know, because I feel like the way I learned is through like either like failure or something like that, or somebody giving me their perspective. So I genuinely, enjoy the conversations I've had with like veterans and stuff. So I I don't think I'd want to know anything more than I know. You know what I mean? I don't think I'd want to be sped up. I enjoyed the journey I had. Like even now, like I'm still learning. Um, I don't. I think sometimes if you have everything, all the tools, you take it for granted. So not knowing everything may have helped me in the long run, because I enjoyed the ride. You know what I mean? The experience all the way.
So you just take it day by day, match
Yeah,
by match, show by show.
yeah, and try and like if somebody critiqued me or said something in the past, like I try to bring that to that next match. Like, all right, you did this really bad. Okay, let's never do that again. How do you get that in your head? You just keep thinking about it, keep thinking about it, and you bring it into the next batch with you, and you make sure you don't do it in the future.
So what is going through your head before a match before you step through that curtain?
Um, I usually right before I go through the curtain, I'm listening to the last match. Like, how did that last match leave? Did it leave the crowd flat? Did it leave the crowd high? Did it leave the crowd low? Depends on what's before me. I like especially when I'm out there. Um, I like to just stand there, and when I get in the ring and like my opponent's coming out, I'm looking at the crowd. I'm trying to see like who's interacting, who's not interacting, who's cheering, who's not cheering. Like who's maybe playing with their phone, who's not playing with their phone. So if you think Johnny Moran's not staring at you, Johnny Moran is watching. I like to read the crowd, man. So it's very important for me to be in the go position or the gorilla position right before my match, because I want to hear how that crowd just was. Because if it was too high, now you got to, like in my head, you have to slow it down, get them back. It may take you a little longer because they just had a huge adrenaline dump. Now you got to figure out how to get them back up.
Very good, very good. That's a great answer right there, my friend.
Hmm.
So, when you're in a match, when you're doing your thing, how do you interact with the crowd? How do you try to make them boo you or cheer you, whatever you're doing?
It depends on the situation. I usually find the like loudest person in the room, or like I don't know if I see like a group of kids that like I see are just booing the heels. Obviously, like they're wearing a SpongeBob shirt. I'm going over to them and I'm like, I hate SpongeBob if I'm a bad guy. You know what I mean? But if I'm a baby face, I'm like, hey, high five. I love SpongeBob. You know what I mean? Like easy stuff like that. Like people overthink and they're like, oh, I'm not cool if I go over there and high five a kid and say I like SpongeBob. Like it's going to get them more in the match. So you're not too cool to go high five that fan. Also, that fan may follow you after this. So you're not too cool to high five anybody. Be a good baby face. Go out there and high five the kids. Um, but it really is all situational. Someone could yell something out, and then I just think of either a funny one liner or something I could burn them with. You know what I mean? Like it's all situational, and it's something that I picked up because like I used to do musical theater in high school, and I did a lot of drama in high school. So like normally you don't hear people yell things out at those, but when you're doing rehearsals and there's like people that aren't in scenes, they'll yell stuff out just to mess with the drama teacher. And I was always good when my friends would bust me when I'd be on stage at either giving it back to them or turning it into a joke. So it's just something I like picked up earlier in life because I performed my whole life. Kind of how to be in front of a crowd.
So, I'm assuming you've done both heel and face during your career. What's your
Mhm.
favorite thing to do?
That's tough because I love being a heel. Love it. It's easy. But babyface is challenging. Getting people to actually believe in you, really tough. And then when you get to believe them to believe in you, like man, there's no better feeling than that. So it's a real tough question. I don't know if I could say I like either better. I know heel's easy, and I can get it down pat and have you hating me in seconds. But babyface, I kind of like the struggle sometimes. I like trying to figure this crowd out, you know. So I don't know if there's a per se favorite.
I totally agree with you about the face thing. That's hard
Yeah.
to master. It's hard to
Oh
do.
my god. Yeah.
It's hard to get people behind you and cheer you. Trust
Yes.
me, I tried it in my career as well when I used to be a wrestler. Totally failed.
Yeah. Wow. I don't know if you failed. You always try again. You know.
So let's talk dream matches. What are some names that you have in mind that you haven't wrestled yet that you want to get in the ring with?
Haven't are indies or are we talking pros? What are we
Doesn't
talking?
matter.
Dream like dead alive.
Indies, pros, dead alive, doesn't matter. Give
Uh,
me a few names.
a few names. All right, Kevin Cross, um, Killer Cross, whatever you want to call him, Karrion Cross. That would probably be a number one. He's on the indies right now. Um, Joe Coffey, he's out of NXT UK. I really like his work. Samoa Joe. If it's someone that would be retired, I would say Stone Cold Steve Austin. Uh, obviously Hulk Hogan, John Cena. And if it was an ultimate like tag match, it would be me and my tag partner Mike Mitchell, the Mighty Militia. It would be us versus FTR, and then us versus the Brainbusters. And Ravishing Rick Rude. I would love to work Ravishing Rick Rude.
That's all great matches that I would love to see, man. Rest in peace
Thank you.
to some of those guys that you just
Yeah.
mentioned, especially Ravishing and Recruit, a great wrestler. But I feel like you versus Killer Cross would be a great match for sure.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I didn't know that now that you just mentioned that you were a tag team with Mike Mitchell. I didn't know that.
Yeah. We teamed together. I was the third member of the extra guys. We used to do like a trio gimmick. They started out as a tag, him and John Redbeard, and then they brought me along when I graduated, and I was like their third for a little while. Then John went away for a while, so then me and Mike just did like a solo tag together as the Mighty Militia.
So what do you like to do better, tag team
Ooh,
or singles?
I knew you were going there. Goddamn. Um, I like both. I like singles better because I'm in control. Um, Tag match, you're not always in control. You're kind of, you're playing coach on the sidelines when your partner's in there. And then when you're in there, your partner's sometimes playing coach. But in singles, it's all on you. You can't blame anybody. Well, I mean, you can blame your opponent, but I mean, I don't ever do that. I just kind of take it on my own chin. But, you know, in a singles match, it's just you.
I
It's all
agree with
on you.
I agree with that, but in my opinion, a tag team is much better because you gotta take less bumps.
Oh, yeah. No, I agree with you on that. But
So, last question for me, Mr. Moran.
yeah.
What can we expect out of you in the next 3 years?
Hopefully national TV somewhere, whether it be a WWE, AEW, NWA. Um, I see Ring of Honors possibly coming back, New Japan, whatever it is, Impact.
Is that what's your goal to like? If let's say all those companies came at once, who would you pick?
All those companies came at once. I'm picking WWE. Right now, the goal I have set pretty much is the NWA. Um, but yeah, if they all came at once, I mean, I think anybody would say WWE or AEW. You know what I
For
mean? They're
sure.
the two biggest dogs right now.
I agree. For sure. So where can our listeners follow you on social media?
Twitter and Instagram, it's Johnny Moran _. Facebook, it's Johnny Moran the Wrestler. YouTube, you got to look up Johnny Moran the Wrestler. There's also a basketball player. He's apparently really, really good. So make sure you type in wrestler after my name. And you can check out my podcast, Moran and Friends. It drops every Wednesday on all streaming platforms. and also YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter.
Any upcoming matches or shows that you want to promote?
Yeah, actually, this weekend I'm wrestling Kyle the Beast KTV at Titan Championship Wrestling. It's at the Accelerated Sports Arena in New Jersey.
Well, there you go, folks. Go follow my friend Johnny Moran on all those platforms. Go check out that match in New Jersey and check out his podcast, Johnny Moran and Friends. Also, subscribe to our YouTube channel, 5 Star Revolution Podcast, and also follow us right here on YouTube, 5 Star Revolution Podcast. Mr. Johnny Moran, we wish you the best of luck in your career, and thank you so much for joining us here on the podcast. Thank you, man.
Thank you for having me.
Have a great day.
You too. What do you think of this? Moran and Friends, the movie.
Break it. You bought it.
Hey, where the hell is the water? Bob Culture, my favorite podcaster.
This locker room is bigger than a locker room. It's a family.
Anthony Blackwell, my favorite podcaster, man. Hey!
Oh. You shut the fuck up. I'm trying to cut a promo. I just met a wrestler, the greatest wrestler in the world. Done a lot of really cool fucking things.